I see so many friends out here this evening. Thank you so much. Sorry we could not have given you more advance notice of this. All right, how's this? Oh. I was asked to give an account of my experience having been present at the March on Washington in 1963. My first thought was, are you asking me to remember something 55 years ago? But that day made such an impression on me that it is not likely that I will ever forget it. So I sat at my kitchen table last night and I started writing things down that I remembered that I would like to share with you. My name is Fred Prejean. That's what my friends call me. I attended the March on Washington 55 years ago on August 28, 1963, and I witnessed Dr. King deliver his iconic I Have a Dream speech. I was one of two people from Lafayette who attended this historic event. When I arrived in D.C., we had no place to stay, nor could we afford one, and there were no vacancies at hotels anyway. With 250,000 people, many of whom were visitors, the hotels were jam-packed. I left Lafayette with $15 in my pocket. But we found a Catholic church that was housing visitors in their school gymnasium and allowed us to spend the night there. It was a week before my 17th birthday. I was to begin my senior year in high school the next month. I had never attended a demonstration, but I knew something important was happening. Something historic in American history was taking place. A life of segregation was the only life I had known since the day I was born. A life of exclusion was the only option unless you were willing to face a life of incarceration for being black. It was intimidating to live in a marginalized lifestyle, but it was a generational experience I was forced to accept. At the rally, I remember the crowds of people at the Lincoln Memorial, later estimated as I said, some 250,000 who came to Washington. At that time, it was the largest demonstration ever seen in the nation's capital and one of the first to have extensive television coverage. The entire nation was watching this event, but so was the entire world. An event sponsored by descendants of slaves. 1963 was noted for racial unrest and civil demonstrations. Nationwide outrage was sparked by media coverage of police actions in Birmingham, Alabama, where attack dogs and fire hoses were turned against protesters, many of whom were in their early teens as I was, and some even younger. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested and jailed during these protests, writing his famous letters from Birmingham City Jail, which advocates civil disobedience against unjust laws. Dozens of additional demonstrations had taken place across the country, from California to New York, culminating in the March on Washington. But alas, I saw a day of promise, unlike any experience I had ever seen. I remember singing, chanting slogans, holding hands with strangers, many of whom were white people. This was the first time in my life I had been in the presence of so many white people at one time. This of course, was not encouraged in Lafayette and would be viewed as intolerable in 1963. Recall, the schools in Lafayette at that time had not been integrated. The event at the Lincoln Memorial included musical performances by Mahalia Jackson, Marian Anderson, Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and Mary, Joan Baez, and Josh White. There were many performances by gospel singers as well. Charlton Heston delivered a speech representing a contingent of artists, and Sidney Poitier read a speech by James Baldwin.
Power went out.
Let me see if I can speak loud enough for you to hear.
Generator went out.
As we listened to the many speakers, I remember how peaceful and quiet everyone was. It's an eerie sight to see 250,000 people in complete silence as speakers delivered their presentations. Civil rights leaders A. Philip Randolph, now Congressman John Lewis, Whitney Young Jr., and Roy Wilkins each spoke. James Farmer, who was imprisoned in Louisiana at the time, had his speech read by Floyd McKissick. Other speakers included Catholic, Protestant, and Jewish religious leaders, and labor leader Walter Rudolph. The one female speaker was Josephine Baker, who introduced several Negro women fighters for freedom, was their name, including Rosa Parks. Yes, I saw Rosa Parks. Finally, Dr. King was introduced, and the crowd went wild with applause and cheers. While listening to Dr. King and the I Have a Dream speech, I experienced a feeling of pride, self-worth, spirituality, and the meaning of being an American. Dr. King's speech remains one of the most famous speeches in American history. He started with prepared remarks saying he was there to cash a check for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, while warning fellow protesters not to allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. And there was no physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force, he said. But then he departed from his script, shifting into I Have a Dream theme he used on prior occasions, drawing on both the American dream and religious themes, speaking of an America where his children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He followed this with an exhortation, let freedom ring across the nation, and he concluded with the following. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black and white, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Yes, sir.
The march itself has had a profound effect on me. After high school, I continued in movements of racial justice, peace, and equality. That day in Washington left me with a sense of optimism about the possibility of real change. Dr. King's words remains instilled in me and many others as we continue to support the principles of humanity he espoused. But symbols of the past, such as this monument to white supremacy, still reflect a legacy of hate we continue to strive to eliminate so that all Americans might one day truly be free. This symbol of white supremacy, this symbol belongs to a different era and must be moved.
Yes, sir.
I ask you, please, join our organization, Move the Mindset, and help us achieve this mandate. Judge me by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. To those whom this may apply, I say, cast aside racial, social, and political hypocrisy, and let the cool waters of inclusion refresh your soul. I ask that you join me now in repeating after me. We are one people, let us live as one.
We are one people, let us live as one.
We are one people, let us live as one.
We are one people, let us live as one.
I say it like you mean it. We are one people, let us live as one.
We are one people, let us live as one.
Thank you.